folks, Jayland Bio here. Today we are going to talk a little bit about classification. That is the classification of organisms. There are so many different organisms that live on this planet that it is imperative that we have a system to be able to classify those animals. It not only helps us distinguish certain animals from one another, but also helps us understand how closely certain species are related to one another, very similar to what we've talked about previously in our evolution and natural selection videos. So let's dive on in. We have quite a few key learning objectives for this particular video. First, we should be able to relate the concepts of biochemistry to classification. We should be able to relate biodiversity to classification. Biodiversity being the secret word of the video. Dun dun dun. You should also be able to list common levels of modern classification in order, describe and make cladograms, which we'll do quite a bit in lab, and describe the six-kingdom system of classification. So quite a few new vocabulary terms for this particular video. We will talk about biodiversity, taxonomy, the domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, all part of one system. We'll talk a lot about phylogenetics or phylogeny, and we'll also mention cladograms, something we've actually talked a little bit about before. So the first key concept to understand is the concept of biodiversity, and that just simply refers to the variety of organisms found on Earth. Because Earth has such large biodiversity, it's necessary to have a system to classify these organisms based on their characteristics, based on their common ancestry, and a variety of other factors. Scientists believe that there's potentially more than 30 million species of organisms on this planet, which means that that's a lot of different organisms that we need to be able to differentiate and classify. So how do we classify organisms? Well, we use the concept of taxonomy, and taxonomy is just simply the naming and classification of organisms. And we go from most generic to most specific. So the most generic is domain, and there are three key domains that we're going to look at. They're broken down into 6 kingdoms, and then there's a variety of different phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, being species the most specific out of the bunch. And you probably heard the terms like Homo sapien before. That just simply refers to the genus and the species of the organism. So we'll dive into that a little bit later on. But this is a system you are going to have to memorize. So one way I always remember it, especially starting with kingdom, is that King Philip came over for good spaghetti. It is a little way you can kind of remember that it goes kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. King Philip came over for good spaghetti. And then just remember domains. Maybe you could say Dr. King Philip came over for good spaghetti, or does King Philip come over for good spaghetti, or something along those lines. So the system that we use to actually specifically describe organisms is the binomial nomenclature, and that's just a system of 2-part names. So what we do is we use the genus name and the species name to describe an organism. So for example, Homo sapien, or if you're looking for a wolf, that would be Canis lupus. These are terms that you've probably heard of before, and most of these names are written in Latin. Sometimes the names can be descriptive, so it may not necessarily be in Latin, it may just sound like Latin. An example might be Terrapine, Carolina. Terrapins refer to turtles. If you're familiar with the University of Maryland, I believe they are the Terrapins, and their mascot's a turtle-like creature. And Carolina is a state in the eastern part of the United States, so Terrapin, Carolina refers to the eastern box turtle. And there's lots of other ones like this that really are very descriptive in terms of what the organism is. We'll dive into that a little bit later on. Now, it's important to also be able to study phylogenies, and to do that we look at what's called a phylogenetic tree. And this is a family-like tree that shows evolutionary relationships. So if you see here, we have a variety of different organisms, and the points in which the 2 lines meet represent common ancestry. It also represents a differentiation in a certain trait that helps us differentiate one organism for another. So for example, if we look at the dot that says fur and placenta, basically everything up from that is going towards the top of the screen, will have fur and placenta. Everything that does not go through that dot does not have fur and placenta, and we could probably all agree that frogs, turtles, vipers, and crocodiles do not have fur, and their offspring are not connected to a placenta. So this is a really good way to be able to show evolutionary relationships and how closely organisms are related to one another. Keep in mind that as we go up towards the top of the screen, we get to more recent times. So as we go down, we actually go back in time. And each dot, again, represents a common ancestor that once existed that evolved those other two organisms from that common ancestor. This is also an example of a cladogram, which uses shared and derived characteristics for grouping purposes. So you can see the characteristics are the little dots here, like the fur and the placenta, the amnios, paws, without fur nor placenta, without mandibular window. You get the idea here. So we'll look at a lot of these when we go through and complete a variety of labs on this particular subject. Now, when we look at domains, there are three key domains that we're going to look at that all organisms are kind of grouped into. The first one is bacteria, and you should know that bacteria are simple one-celled prokaryotes. There's also one that's called archaea, and archaea simply just refers to like old bacteria, and these are prokaryotes that have very distinctive cell membranes or cell walls and other unique biological properties. So, for example, halophiles. Halophiles really enjoy living in salt. They thrive on that. Thermophiles enjoy living in very, very warm conditions. And then we also have eukarya, which are your eukaryotes, so your plants, your animals, your fungi, and some of your single-celled eukaryotes as well. Now we divide these domains into 6 actual kingdoms. The 6 kingdoms, we have eubacteria, which are true bacteria. They're located under the bacteria domain. We have archaea bacteria, which are the ancient bacteria located under the archaea domain. And then protista, fungi, plantae, and animalia are all located under the eukarya domain. So all of these different kingdoms, they all have different organisms that exhibit different traits. And we can divide those even more when we go into phylum, and then class, and then order, family, genus, and species. So there's quite a bit going on here, but we'll go through and spend some time working through some of these and help you understand it on a little bit deeper level. So hopefully you got the objectives from this video. It's pretty straightforward. We're just going to be looking at how we classify organisms, and we're going to be building some cladograms, some phylogenetic trees, and also diving into a little bit of dichotomous keys, which we haven't talked about yet, but we will take a little bit of a dip into that here in just a little while. So hope you have a great day, guys. We will talk to you later. JLand Bio. Goodbye.